Good evening. Before I begin this address, I would like to acknowledge and recognize that I undertake this engagement today on land the indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for thousands of years. I am grateful to work and live on this land, and by doing so, give my respect to its first inhabitants. Good evening to all of you. My name is Ray Williams, and thank you for the invitation to address this gathering of the Canadian Aboriginal Minority Supply Council. By way of a quick background, I'm a father, husband, traveler. Well, not so much a traveler these days, but wine lover and weekend barbecue warrior, one of my passions. I'm also a mentor, collaborator, trusted advisor, and a committed community advocate. My day job is as a senior relationship manager at National Bank Financial, a Quebec based institution. All of these, however, really are mere descriptors, even though they might be accurate. The wider public at the end of the day sees me above all else, I would say, as a black man walking in my black skin. This perspective is reflected in the subtle racism of skewed expectations and the discounting of what I believe to be our competence and brilliance. Racism and discrimination are deeply ingrained in the social, economic, and political fabric of our society. This is something that many of us know, acknowledge, and have to live through. It is from this perspective, however, that I would like to share with you some of my approaches and some of my recent undertakings. I would have to say that 2020 has been, without doubt, a profound year. I believe we'll look back upon this particular year as a year of inflection. I believe it is also a year that has provided an opportunity for collateral beauty. COVID-19 and the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, all highlighted long-standing inequities within the Black community, which has faced both direct and systemic racism throughout its 247-year history in Canada. As the government has recognized, systemic racism occurs when institutions or systems create or maintain racial inequity, often as a result of hidden institutional biases in policies, practices, and procedures that privilege some groups and disadvantage others. The COVID-19 pandemic and the social movements following the events that I referenced in terms of George Floyd, etc., I think brought anti-Black racism to the forefront of the Canadian consciousness and shone a stark light on the inequities and inequalities that disproportionately hurt Black Canadians. As Prime Minister Trudeau himself said to Parliament, the global calls for justice, for equality, for peace have found echo in our communities because anti-Black racism also happens here. The pandemic has had what can only be deemed a devastating impact on the Black community and marginalized communities. Relative to the national average, working Black Canadians are 2.5 times more likely to have sought treatment for COVID-19 and 2.5 times more likely to have been admitted to hospital for a confirmed or suspected case of COVID-19. In August of this year, the national rate of joblessness was 9.4% for those who did not identify as a visible minority or Aboriginal, but it was 17.6% for Black individuals. The disparate impacts of COVID-19 are the results of existing inequalities, and the research shows very clearly that Black Canadians are being pushed steadily down the ladder of opportunity by lack of access to education, employment and promotion, as well as capital needed to buy homes, grow businesses, and raise healthy, productive families. Canada's Black communities have been marginalized going all the way back to the late 18th century, and it has become clear that COVID-19 has continued to highlight this disproportionate impact on Black Canadians. So let me share with you some of the things that I've been engaged with of late, in large part as a function of some of what occurred this year, but some of this was taking place in the background. So in particular, part of my community engagement is with just really trying to empower our community. And I would say the Black Opportunity Fund, which is something that was put together this year, has come about as a unique and dynamic partnership between the Black community, businesses, philanthropists, government, and foundations with a mission of raising capital to serve and empower the Black community. We have a particular target to grow in excess of $1 billion over 10 years. The fund is designed to serve existing Canadian organizations as the world's largest fund for the Black community. We first started talking about this last year. It was more general conversation about how do we empower, how do we create intergenerational wealth, what are the most important components that we could look to help create this situation, and also recognizing that we are living in a time of tech, the fourth industrial revolution. How badly are we being left behind? So as I mentioned, the first discussion started last year, but we launched back in on June 25 with Black leaders from across multiple provinces and with broad, I would say, professional expertise. While relatively new, the fund has moved quickly to mobilize resources and a clear strategy to respond to long-standing inequalities. The primary focus is to create an initiative developed by the Black community to serve the Black community. The ongoing racial injustices that underpin this urgent need to create more opportunities for Black Canadians. I believe the opportunity is here. The time is now. There is an urgency of now. And we have, I think, the opportunity to move the needle in a positive direction. So that's part of the reason for the launch with, as I mentioned earlier on, 51 others comprised of professionals. And the major aim here is to attract investment in Black-controlled companies and organizations in Canada as a foundational way to combat anti-Black racism. The fund will hopefully facilitate access to long-term strategic investments to bring about lasting change. Looking at the big picture, I believe this initiative will catalyze the cultural, economic, and political growth required to enable Canada's institutions, governments, and businesses to embrace greater diversity at all levels. It's important to recognize that many Black community organizations are out there right now that continue to do really important work at a grassroots level. So the idea from our perspective is to support their efforts, help them build scale and capacity to exact the change required at the grassroots level. We cannot, as individuals or a collective coming in at this point in time, believe that we'll know everything. So the importance of us engaging with the community organizations on the ground, whether it be in Quebec, whether it be in Halifax, whether it be in Manitoba or here in Ontario, is of paramount importance, because what it reflects is our desire to ensure that we're hearing what the needs are from those people who have a greater understanding. So the fund will focus itself on, I would say, 5 core areas where Black people continue to experience systemic racism: healthcare, education, business, justice, and politics. And we urge the Government of Canada to develop a national response for dismantling this deeply entrenched racism. The pandemic, I think, really has laid bare the inequities of our healthcare system. In education, Black students do not have equal opportunities for academic success. A recent Government of Ontario report also found that, stuff that we know, that a disproportionate number of young folks from our community are being streamed into applied level courses, and that post-graduation opportunities are limited for students enrolled in these programs. I note, in fact, that last week, Wayne Pabu and his wife, in fact, initiated something called the Onyx Initiative, which actually will help deal with some of these issues. In the corporate world, where I come from, inequity runs rampant, and the excellence and competency that I've referenced of Black professionals is consistently overlooked and consistently discounted. So the fund is seeking to partner with banks and other financial institutions to co-invest in Black-owned businesses in a more effective way to create the economic empowerment that we would like to see for our community. When it comes to the basic human right of access to justice, a disproportionate number of Black citizens are targeted by law enforcement. So we continue to be underrepresented in the right places as it speaks to justice, but overrepresented in too many of the other places. So trying to tackle racism with such an entrenched history will require some substantial structural and fundamental change. And necessarily, it will require surveying the grassroots action that's taking place to make it sustainable over a period of time. The recent events have really underscored this glaring urgent need to bring about lasting change and realize the opportunities we can use to build a more inclusive nation we can all be proud of. I believe that the Black Opportunity Fund will do just that, and I'm thankful to work with such talented individuals on the steering committee who have this bold and aspirational vision for taking us forward as a nation. We've come a very long way in a short period of time, and we will have a lot more ahead. So at this point in time, I say thank you and have a great evening, and greatly appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, or certainly share my perspectives on what it is that we're undertaking. Thanks so much.